All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started because there's a lot of material to cover and not a lot of time to do it. Okay. Audio dude. It's all good. All right, everybody, thanks for coming. I can't believe that this many people came out to talk about Madoka at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, so thank you all for being here. This is incredible. Now, this is not only my first time giving this panel, but giving a panel, so bear with me if there's any technical difficulties. But for now, let's roll into it. I'm McDougal, Madoka fan extraordinaire, and I'm here to talk about what is the deal with Madoka the Rebellion movie, because it is one heck of a film. Alright, so why talk about Rebellion at all? This movie came out 4 years ago, so why does it still bear discussion? Well, honestly, it's still controversial. 4 years later, if you go into a thread and you post Homura did nothing wrong, you are going to get 1,000 angry people insisting otherwise. Now, another really cool thing about Rebellion is that it's one of the few films in anime that I know of that are more recent that really come close to being art house movies. Not that it is an art house movie, but it borrows a lot from it. It clearly is part of the legacy. What do I mean by that? We'll get into it. All right, so let's talk about what art house cinema means. There's a lot of text on this screen. I won't really go through all of it, but essentially, an art house film is a film that is made with extreme rigorous precision to the author's original vision. You know, the artist, the director, the cinematographer, they have a very fine idea in their head of what they want this movie to be. Nothing interferes with it. Usually the subject matter is very artistic. One of these definitions notes that it typically is about contemplation of existence, which says a lot toward Rebellion. Now, I know there's a note in there about it being a non-commercial movie, which Rebellion is definitely not. They were looking for a little bit of money, just a little. But anyway, Rebellion borrows a lot of the ideas of conveyance through picture. What I mean by that is Rebellion is the sort of movie where you're not going to understand everything just from the dialogue or just from the plot, what's happening on screen. In order to truly get everything in the movie and understand all of what's happening in the background, you have to pay attention to how the visuals are laid out. What's being shown to you on the screen is just as critical to understanding the film as the actual dialogue itself. Cinematography, just to be a little more clear, this definition, the cinematographer, one of the most obscure members of the production team, is responsible for all the visual elements of a film. These are the people who stage the shots, who decide how the scene is going to be lit, who's standing in what position, what place are they going to be in, what time of day will it be. You know, all the visual elements are controlled by cinematography and the cinematographers. In essence, cinematography is the art of constructing images on camera to convey information visually as well as possible. So a classic example, if you go to film school to learn about what is cinematography really, check out this screen cap from a film called The Graduate. This film aired in 1967 and is probably one of the finest examples of cinematography to date. So to give you context on this film, this young guy is named Ben, and Ben is being seduced by an older woman who is married, and he does not want to sleep with this woman, but she wants to sleep with him. And she's gotten him into the bedroom, but he's too nervous and shy to really say anything and eject himself from the situation. So there's a shot where she's sticking her leg out and pulling her pantyhose down to try to seduce him. But look at what's happening here. Look at his posture. He's standing there with his hands in his pockets. His shoulders are slumped over. He has an askance look. He's very nervous. But meanwhile, look at her leg. Her leg is in the foreground of the shot. It's the largest object on screen. It's right in front of your face, and it's right in front of his face. The reason the leg is there that way is because it's conveying to you that she is the one with all of the power in this scene. Her leg is dominating the screen in the way that she herself is dominating the scene. She is the dominant force and is thus taking up everything you see in the foreground. She's the main focus. Is everyone with me here? This is weird. If you don't get it, feel free to say something because it's a pretty niche concept. But the idea is that by placing things in a certain position or size on film, on a shot, you can convey a lot with just that alone. So another concept I want to go over, if any of you have been here for the Jed Blue panels in the past, you have no doubt heard about this 1,000 times, so I apologize if it's repetitive, but there is a lot of dialoguing with classical literature that happens in Madoka. Urobuchi Gen is a humongous Western classical literature fan. he throws in tons of character allegories and comparisons in his work that are intended to inform the way we think about certain characters. For example, this one's very obvious, but Madoka is very, very, very much a Faustian story. The whole Faustian bargain idea, you know, a wish can only bring you suffering if it's illogical and goes beyond the realm of what you should be doing. And there's tons of other stuff in there too. Homura's the Nutcracker is going to be a huge part of this presentation, so I will get there. Sayaka's the Little Mermaid, that's super obvious. I won't hit on all of these things, but we'll move on. All right, so now let's actually begin digging into Rebellion, what you're all here for. All right, so there are a lot of symbols in Rebellion. Symbols that are established both in the film and in the series prior, that when you see these symbols on screen, you know that has something to do with the character that is being symbolized. You know that, okay, if you're seeing, for example, that there's a salamander on screen in Rebellion, you know that something having to do with Homura is going on, and it means something relating to Homura. The ones that are in bold and green are the ones that are the most important, and the ones that I'm going to kind of establish right now. But all of these are relevant symbols. If you can't read the text on screen, I'm sorry. I'll run through it real quick. So Madoka's symbols, as seen in Rebellion, are the color pink, obviously. The moon, especially sometimes depicted with her and Homura as two halves of the moon. Roses, hearts sometimes. And the two most important ones for her are the wind-up key or clock key, grandfather clock key, and a spool of pink thread. You see those a lot in the movie. For Homura, you have clocks, gears, and time, of course. You have the salamander, which I'll show you in a bit. You have fire. That's always been Homura's symbol, especially because Homura means fire, or is one of the words for fire. The Nutcracker, again, we'll get there. Red spider lilies. I will explain why that's Homura's thing and what exactly that means. And then, of course, the keyhole to correspond with the wind-up key for Madoka, and then record players and phonographs. For Sayaka, you have water, music, and instruments. You have mermaids and the color blue. These are all pretty simple. They're all tied back to the original series. For Kyoko, you have eyes. Eyes are a really big one with her that comes up all the time. And apples, which are obviously going to come up too. With Mami, you have cheese. This definitely ties back to the original series where Charlotte ate Mami. And you have four-legged animals. This one's kind of unique to this movie. I'll show you a few shots with it. And Bebe, you have sweets, and you have the fork. Those are, in fact, before Bebe's concept was officially announced, there had some sketches that were being teased where Bebe was like eating stuff, and for a while the fans thought that like the fork was going to be her weapon. So if you look at like early pre-Rebellion fan art, you see a lot where Bebe is like wielding a giant fork into battle, which didn't wind up being the case, but still a pretty funny thing. And then of course a separate non-character related symbol is that windows symbolize the barrier between Madoka's real world and Homura's fictional witch world. And that has a lot to do with the foreshadowing of the movie, which we'll get to. All right, so let's talk about symbols as they're specifically established. So in the transformation sequences, you get a lot of dense imagery, and this one is one of the big symbol establishing shots for Madoka. Now you can see the grandfather clock key. I wish I had a laser pointer. You can see the grandfather clock key, and you know that's going to be specifically her symbol, not only because it shows up here, but because she has the teardrop motif on her outfit, and that's in the middle of the key handle. Also, you have daisies here, which are a common symbol for like innocence and purity, which are pretty well associated with Madoka. The four-leaf clover, just good fortune and luck. And of course, you have Madoka written in katakana behind her. Now, the red spool of thread is on with Madoka. It's really interesting. This one shows up a lot, and the biggest place where it's established, I'll show you this short clip. I apologize for what is inevitably going to be an abysmal frame rate here, so bear with me. Wow, this is so bad. So this comes in, that's the timestamp in the bottom right. So an hour and 12 minutes into the movie, you see this scene where this is when Homura's like finally unraveled the truth, and she's in her like Coliseum right before she transforms. And you see the mural of Madoka, and from where Madoka was, the spool of thread falls down. This is what I mean by cinematography. The fact that the spool of thread is falling onto the screen from where Madoka just was is communicating to you that it's Madoka's symbol. You're supposed to think about Madoka as this happens. And the Clara doll's kicking that around, that's something I'll bring up later. That's another important thing. What else? This is another clip. Here we go. This is post, like, witchification of Homu. Oh man, I could have played this faster on a stack of Post-its. So this is when Homura is, consuming the universe. Okay, so for Homura, Madoka is at the center of all of her actions. Madoka is Homura's life. The spool of pink thread literally being made into the core of Homura's new soul gem is telling us that Homura is doing everything for Madoka. She's taking Madoka's power and basing everything around her. She's constructing this new universe for Madoka's sake. That's part of what that scene is conveying to you. All right, so now we're moving on to Homura symbology. I'm going through this pretty quick. I'll tie everything together and why it's all important as we go. But right now I want to establish what all the symbols are. So this one is important, the salamander. The salamander as a spirit has always been associated with fire. A lot of primal mythologies will depict the salamander as a fire spirit. Why? I'm not sure why that came to be, but it is what it is. But you'll see the salamander crop up all over this movie, wherever Homura is involved. The big one is this. So this is actually a foreshadowing scene, and in fact, I'll bring this up in my section later on about why or how Rebellion foreshadows the conclusion. And you see a guy turning a hand crank, and symbols for all the other characters are inside this crank. You'll see the key in the bottom left is Madoka symbol, the Bebe fork symbol, the Mami four-legged deer symbol, the Kyoko apple, etc. But a salamander is sitting on top of this box. And the box is that black charcoal color that we see often with Homura, with her devil outfit, with her uniform as one of the subcolors besides purple. This is basically a foreshadowing moment telling you that this is Homura's world and we're looking at it and we're all just reveling in this farce. But the fact that the salamander is on top is showing you specifically that it's Homura's thing. Homura is the salamander. Homura is controlling everything that we're seeing in this movie. This comes up again here when Kyubey is saying, "You're dead," and going through his whole spiel. He's talking specifically about Homura being dead and, where are your body and soul? And when this happens, it shows a dead, twitching salamander in a bowl. It's hard to see on this projector, I'm sorry, but that's half of a salamander, and it's dead. And the idea is, hey, Homura is dead, and this is communicating that to you. The other thing, I think, this is a clip. Okay, if those other things didn't make it obvious, this should make it obvious. So this is after Homura has transformed into a witch. And these are her last thoughts that are sort of echoing before her consciousness disappears. So Homura's soul is being represented as a purple salamander that splays all over the rock and dies. That's the most fine-tuned moment of that's what that is. And again, finally, when Homura crafts her new soul gem, this is the emblem. And it's a salamander over a diamond thing. All right, so the next important Homura symbol is the red spider lily. Now, red spider lilies are a traditional Japanese flower symbol of death. They are just known to frequently bloom in cemeteries. Why? I don't know, but it's what they do. But more importantly, there's a symbology with them where they lose all of their leaves before they bloom. So it's been considered a Buddhist symbol of death and reincarnation. Now, this scene with this screen cap happens as Homura is saying, how did this happen to me? When did I become a witch? And all of these spider lilies just shoot up out of the ground and grow right in front of her at that moment as she's saying that, to communicate to us that, yes, Homura is in fact dead, and she is in fact now a witch. Moving on from there, windows are the big symbol of Rebellion's labyrinth and the boundary between the real world and Homura's world. The very first scene of the movie, 57 seconds in, we see Homura's soul gem falling through an empty space as she gives a monologue about what the reality of being a magical girl is like, and it falls into a window, and the window closes. This is showing us the moment where Homura constructs her witch barrier. She constructs her labyrinth, and the whole window closes, and that's sort of the boundary, and Homura's soul gem has fallen to the other side of it. We see this again when Homura is remembering Madoka and remembering everything that happened, and she's walking through this big room where flashbacks are playing through all these windows. Again, these windows are the boundary to the real world, so the stuff that's happening in the real world in the past would naturally be on the other side of the window. And finally, we actually see this very literally represented when you get this little flashback scene when, after this moment happens, we go back to the time when Homura made her contract. They show that scene again. And you see the background, the darkest part of the screen is the witch barrier, the labyrinth, and on the right of it, the real world is being shown to you through a window. And finally, Madoka at the end, when she is sort of trying to get Homura to forgive herself and save herself, her hand literally reaches in through a window from the outside to reach out to Homura. Homu Lily's design itself incorporates a lot of this symbology. Do you have a question? That's a really good question. So the question was, why does Madoka's hand have cut marks all over it as she's coming through the window? That is really a Homura perception kind of thing. So for Homura, and I'll actually talk about this later too, the sacrifice of Madoka was this unacceptable reality, this thing that she couldn't stand the fact that it happened. And for her, Madoka is suffering. Madoka might not necessarily agree with this, but to Homura, Madoka is in a state of agony. And so she sees Madoka as this wounded figure, this damsel in distress that she must save. And that's why when she sees Madoka's hand coming through the window, to her it looks like Madoka is suffering. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about Homu Lily. Now again, the dead spider lily thing is here again. Her head is covered in red spider lilies. Her lack of an upper jaw, because the top of her head was sliced off and fell off when she transformed, that ties into the Nutcracker imagery that I'm going to trace through the film. The shackles. Now, Homura's whole thing throughout this entire film is that she feels incredibly guilty. She says it in the Field of Flowers in a later scene, I should never have let this happen. How could I have made such a mistake? She thinks that allowing Madoka to become Marokami was a huge blunder on her own part, and she feels guilty, and her desire is to be punished, which is why she's being led in shackles to a guillotine the whole time. Also, her hands are being pulled along by a red ribbon, which is the same ribbon that Madoka wears in her hair. Now, the interesting thing about Homu Lily's design as well is that it's very much, more than any other character that we've seen, a typical depiction of a witch. You don't see it now because her head was slit off, but when she first transforms, she's wearing the brimmed witch hat, and she has the long witch nose, and she's wearing the big, long black witch dress, which you see here, though it's been mostly stripped away at this point. And again, that's Homura really feeling that self-loathing and that self-hatred that has driven her to this state. And finally, do I think I have it in the next slide? No. Okay, sorry about that. So there's a scene where she's being led down a street, and you see these hands sort of reaching out behind her from the back of her dress, trying to drag the ground and causing a lot of destruction and havoc. That is her subconscious wishing for salvation. Deep down, Homura does want to be saved, but she won't acknowledge this. It's behind her. Another thing, I didn't write it here, both the hat, which you don't see, and the phonograph, that's part of Homura's whole cyclical nature. So Homura's whole thing is she keeps looping back in time. So she keeps repeating the same cycle. She can't break herself free of going around in circles. And that's what the phonograph represents. All right, now let's talk about all those transformation sequences that happen during the nightmare fight, because there's a lot of stuff being established during those. Don't worry, I'll go through them one at a time. Truly the best girl. So, I just talked a big game, but Mami's is probably the least dense of the five. Really, the whole thing with Mami here is that Mami represents the exact same thing that she represented during the original series, and that was, Mami is the avatar of the traditional magical girl show. Mami wants to be the archetypical card captor Sakura type of magical girl. She wants everything to be fun, no one's in any real mortal peril, everything you think of when the term magical girl comes to mind. And this transformation sequence was very much that. Dancing for you, a lot of male gaze stuff. There were a lot of shots that focused on her breasts and focused on her butt. There's a lot of real appealing to the viewer sort of dancing going on here, and that's sort of the traditional magical girl thing. But let's get into some of the more dense ones. Okay, so with Kyoko's, there's a lot of really interesting Buddhist subtext in this one. The shot where she stretches out 8 arms being a common Buddhist symbol. You know what, since I'm talking about it right now, I'll skip ahead to that slide. So in this shot, at the very end of the sequence, there's a lotus flower behind Kyoko. Now the lotus flower is typically tied to a theme of reincarnation and rebirth in Buddhist mythology. And that's sort of hinting at you that this whole thing is a reincarnation, retransformation sequence happening. But more importantly, my favorite shot, probably my favorite shot of any of the transformation sequences, is this shot where Kyoko just tears through the screen unexpectedly and just glares at you. This scene, to me, the way I personally read this, is an admonishment of the viewer. A sort of, I can't believe you're enjoying watching this. After everything you've seen, after everything we've been through, you're going to watch us sing and dance for you and do this crap, knowing how much suffering it brings us. And that's why it's such a visceral, brutal shot. But of course, it cuts right back into it after a second, but I love to read this as like a wake-up call kind of thing. This is a cool shot. All right, now let's move on to another really awesome one. Oh, I must admit, I made a mistake. So in the programming, I wrote that Kyoko was the one breakdancing. That was a mistake on my part that I noticed 2 days ago. I was like, oh no, it's Sayaka breakdancing. That was awesome. The breakdancing is so cool. There needs to be more breakdancing in anime. Make it happen. All right, so I think the most important thing to look at with that shot is the shot where regular uniformed Sayaka enthusiastically sprints into magical girl Sayaka, who's waiting there for her, and the two of them spush together and then combine into Sayaka at the end. Now, to me, the way I read that scene is that in this new world, in this new life of hers, Sayaka is not sacrificing herself in her magical role, she's embracing it. She's embracing her job as a magical girl now. That's the big change from the series where becoming a magical girl brought her nothing but suffering. As far as the breakdancing itself goes, I guess to me that's like an image of freedom, just projecting the image of Sayaka being free from the suffering of the original show. Now, the two densest ones by far are Homura and Madoka. So let's get into what the heck is going on with these. There's a lot. Okay, so there's a few things to note here. So first of all, there are 3 shots where you see witch runes on the screen, and they are all German, and they are all coming from the Clara dolls. The Clara dolls, by the way, are those creepy-faced puppet-looking familiars that Homura has. Why? I'll tell you. So first, this is a German message that says, "Tell Master we are bored." It's really cheeky. The Clara dolls break the fourth wall a lot in the film. They're very cheeky. Very funny. I won't butcher that German, but the translation is "Tell Master we are bored." The second one is "I kill myself." And the third is they glorify death with a small little picture of Madoka's chin on screen. Now, these, for the record, these are like one frame. These are shown to you for a second. The idea with these two in particular, this one's more funny. But the idea with these two in particular is that Homura is telling you, or Homura's familiars are telling you, that this is all Homura's doing. She brought this on herself. This is her witch realm, and she's suffering herself. And there's this admonishment of the idea that, you know, they're spitting in the face of Madoka's sacrifice by forgetting her and by not doing things according to her will, and by letting her do what she's doing, by allowing Madoka to suffer the way she does in Homura's view. It is spitting in the face of her great sacrifice, which should be rectified. Moving on, so in this shot, this is another little bit of foreshadowing. It's showing you that We're watching a movie because this is Homura in a film reel that's spinning. We're not watching real events, we're watching a film. Now in this moment, we see Homura sort of breaking out of the old state she was in. Let me consult my notes here. Okay. So, for this scene, by the way, this just came after the I kill myself message there. It's Homura's desire for change, or perhaps foreshadowing that she's going to change. She's breaking out of what she was and becoming Moemura again, which is really not the best Homura. Badass Homura is the best Homura. But the point is that it's depicting her change. Well, let's go into Madoka's scene now. Madoka's scene is by far the densest of the 5. I escalated the level of symbolism in each one as I went. I can't believe they spent this much money animating a cinnamon roll. Thank God. All right, so I'll bring this shot up again. Just a quick reminder, the daisies of purity and innocence, the key, the Madoka being written there, 4-leaf clover as a symbol of fortune and happiness. There's this other shot that happens where everything behind Madoka is really dark, and there's a keyhole in the middle of the screen. I don't know how well you can see that on the projector, but the center of the screen is being taken up by a giant keyhole right behind Madoka. This shot really reminds me of the many, many shots that occur both in this film and in the original series where it zooms in on Kyubei's eyes as kind of a reminder that Kyubei is always watching you. This is like Homura is always watching you. Homura is always watching Madoka. She's always there in the background, kind of a creepy stalker. But she's always there. Now, there's the scene in the middle of it where Madoka is being rendered in like a lot of different styles. You see her as this very cute, artistic thing. There's like a Andy Warhol style grid. There's the stick figures that look like the Anthonys put them together. Those little fluffy mustachioed balls from the first Witch thing. I'm not quite sure what that means. My take on it is that it's sort of a commentary on Madoka's very dubious origins to Kyubei. Because remember that in this film, Kyubei doesn't know anything about Madoka. She's this irregularity that creeped into the picture for him. And so he doesn't really know how to get a read on her. And so we're seeing a lot of different interpretations of Madoka being shown to you at once. Now there's this. Is this a video? No. So this is the part where she pushes through the window. Again, the window being the symbol of the labyrinth barrier. She pushes through it, comes in, and then Illuminati confirmed. But actually, no, this is borrowing directly from Illuminati imagery. I'm not kidding. So the whole thing with the triangle and the eye is supposed to be God watching you. That's, the 3 points, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the idea of the Illuminati symbol being an eye and a triangle. And God is watching you. Hey, Illuminati confirmed! All right. So now I want to go into power dynamics. This goes into the cinematography stuff I mentioned earlier, where sometimes the backgrounds, the colors, the locations, the things on screen can convey things to you that aren't being said or really shown to you. One of those things that frequently is used, as it was in the graduate image that I showed before, was power dynamics. The idea that by looking at the background of a scene, you can know who's really in control, who's really in charge of what's going on. So let's look at this scene between Homu and Sayaka. Now this is, wait, which one is these? One of these is a clip, right? I made this a clip. Okay, maybe not. Sorry about that. Anyway, so this scene happens right after Sayaka saves Homura from Mami. After Mami and Homura have their awesome fight, and Sayaka stabs the fire hydrant and gets her out of there. By the way, the fire hydrant is a really cool reference to the first episode of the TV series where Sayaka got rid of Homura the same way. So she brings Homura here. Now, it's hard to see on this projector, but the entire setting they're standing in is bombarding you with Sayaka symbology. You've got the walls, which are covered in musical instruments and brass. You've got the floor, which is covered in water. You've got the Sky, which is a shade of blue, which is Sayaka's color. All of these things are showing you that Sayaka is in control the whole time. Homura has no power during any of the scene. And that's what happens. Sayaka gets the one up on her. Homura tries to use her power and gets prevented from doing so. Sayaka is completely in control. And those things are being broadcasted to you through the background and through the colors and through the floor. I really could have sworn I made a video clip of this. Oh yeah, this is a good shot of her. She's splashing around in the water as she tells Homura, like, well, maybe you don't have to do anything. This scene is really cool. This happens right at the end of that whole bit of dialogue. Homura is walking off toward a cut moon. And this actually foreshadows the very last shot of the film, where Homura is standing there looking at the split moon in the sky. What's up? That's a very, very good observation. And honestly, the answer is probably yes. So the question was, if Homura's symbol is fire, does the fact that if Homura's symbol is fire, does the fact that Sayaka fights her with a fire extinguisher part of the whole, like she's beating Homura out in that scene? The answer is yes. In both scenes, Sayaka gets the one up on Homura using the fire hydrant and extinguishing that fire. Very neat observation. All right, now this is another one. So this is just before the scene where Mami and Homura have their awesome spat. God, she's so good. All right, so pay attention to like the angles of the camera in that scene. Throughout that entire scene, we are always looking up at Mami. Mami is being portrayed as very intimidating and imposing. The camera's always looking up at her. It pans up her body from her feet, which sort of makes her look titanic in size. And then you get this shot of her where she's leering down at you menacingly. These things are showing you that Mami is the threat. She is clearly the more powerful of the two in the scene. She has the advantage. Homura is looking up at her. We're looking down at Homura and up at Mami, which again conveys the opposite. It conveys that Homura is at a disadvantage here. There's actually, it's funny, there's a slide that is like really near the end of this presentation that I don't know if I'll be able to get to, but there's a shot when they're having tea in Mami's apartment where Mami walks behind Homura, and you can actually see her lay the ribbon. You see her tie the ribbon around Homura's foot. It's like really subtle in the background, but it's on screen. All right, so another one of the power dynamic things is after all is said and done and Homura has rewritten the universe, she mocks each of the three other magical girls one at a time. She goes out of her way to mock all of them. So in this scene, Mami is standing there and Homura pushes a teacup off the table and breaks it. This not only is destroying a teacup, which is a real Mami thing, but it's mocking the way she died. In the original series, when you saw Mami get killed, the grief seed was standing upright in a shattered teacup. And so this is mocking Mami right down to the way she died. In this scene, Homura tricks Kyoko into throwing an apple down from her tree and wasting it, which actually there's a shot of Kyoko like turning around very surprised when that happens, and she tricks Kyoko into wasting an apple, which Kyoko goes very well out of her way in the original series to say is not a good thing. And finally, there's this shot. So this shot's really cool because she's mocking Sayaka right to her face, literally with words. But I love how she's completely invading Sayaka's personal space, and very casually doing so. She's hunched over, she's fingering her chin, which is a bit of an infantile gesture. You know, there's no concern at all in Homura's face, in her body language, in her tone, in her words. Homura knows that she's completely in control. She can say whatever the damn hell she pleases to Sayaka because Sayaka can't do a thing about it. Also, in this moment, as Homura wipes Sayaka's memories away, the ground floods with water, so not even Sayaka's own symbols can save her in this situation. All right, Homura as the Nutcracker. This is probably the most fun and interesting thing to pick apart in this movie. So there is a ton of symbology and on-screen events that happen that convey the idea that Homura herself is a character allegory of the Nutcracker. Why is this the case? Why did Urobuchi again do this? Well, because there's a lot of parallels thematically between the Nutcracker and Homura herself. One of the things is that Homura feels this incredible guilt over her own uselessness. She feels that she was unable to prevent Madoka from suffering the way she is. The Nutcracker, in the beginning of the E.T.A. Hoffman story, and by the way, I'm referring to the E.T.A. Hoffman story, not the ballet, has his jaw broken and can't crack walnuts anymore. The Nutcracker agonizes over becoming useless because his jaw is broken. There's also a really neat parallel to be drawn between Kyubey and Drosselmeyer, who are both the instigators of everything, but that's not a huge deal. Let's focus on Homura. All right, so the first thing is that the familiars, according to the Rebellion production notes, are literally named the Claras. Now, the Claras is the only continuity error in the Homura Nutcracker thing, because the Clara dolls, Clara is a name that only comes up in the ballet. The main character is named Clara. In the E.T.A. Hoffman story, the character's name is Marie. But it's Zurabutch again. He can do whatever he wants. So it's kind of hard to tell with the colors being the way they are, but this is when Homura's head is sliding off. So this is an inverse allegory of the Nutcracker. With the Nutcracker, his lower jaw broke, which rendered him useless. In this, her upper jaw slides off, rendering her useless. Also, the broken teeth are a thing that happens. When the Nutcracker has his lower jaw broken, some of his teeth fall out. So there are these teeth familiars that are part of Homura's witch form. And there's even text notes on the bottom in Japanese that note that the familiar's job is to hunt wretched white mice. In the Nutcracker story, the Nutcracker was fighting against mice. The Mouse King was the Nutcracker's sworn enemy. These are the also familiars of Homura. Now, these are the Hussars. In the original Nutcracker story, Marie's younger brother Fritz gets toy soldiers for Christmas, and they're Hussar soldiers, and they look like that. And the reason why the Nutcracker's jaw gets broken is because Fritz is jealous of the love that Marie is showering her Nutcracker with. So he intentionally puts a walnut that's far too big for the Nutcracker in the Nutcracker's mouth and tries to force it to break, and that breaks the Nutcracker's jaw instead. This part is really interesting. This is when Homura is trying to talk sense into Mommy right before the fight. You see in the background is a bunch of girls who look like they're going off to war, and there are teeth falling from the ceiling. You know, teeth breaking. This scene happens right after the battle. Homura and Mommy are talking, and Mommy's like kind of starting to remember something and feel like something is going on, and this appears in the sky. This mouth biting a walnut, which is, again, directly taken imagery from the Nutcracker story. Now, in case it wasn't literal enough, let's see. This line of witch rune text right here literally just says the Nutcracker Witch. It says Kurumi Wari no Majo, which is the Nutcracker Witch. So there you go. It's literally spelling it out for you. Oh, this is the scene. Okay, so this is one of the most interesting symbols that is drawn from the Nutcracker. Let's take a look. This is Homura's like, I'm going to do one last test and figure out what's going on here. Whenever I see this scene now, I imagine some guy with his cup of coffee in the front of the bus like, this is fine. All right, so the important thing to talk about in that scene, let me see if maybe I can pause the video. Yeah, wow, awesome. Is these nutcrackers these owls on the clocks. In the original Nutcracker story, after getting her Nutcracker and tending to it and wrapping the Nutcracker's head with a ribbon after Fritz breaks it, Marie is going to bed. As she's going to bed, she looks over and she sees an owl on her clock, and the owl has her Uncle Drosselmeyer's face. And the clock strikes midnight. And as the clock strikes midnight with the owl on it, all the magic stuff starts happening. It's the beginning of the craziness. The Mouse King runs in. The Nutcracker takes up his sword. Actually, this will come up in a minute. All of her other toys burst out of their glass cabinet to fight. It's when everything gets going. And so having the owls land on the Nutcracker... Oh, God. Having the owls land on the clocks like this is a Nutcracker symbol of shit's about to get real. This is a fun little thing. As they pan around the city and everything is being destroyed, a lot of these things that are rising up out of the ground are set pieces from the Nutcracker. This is the glass cabinet. There's the Christmas tree. The Nutcracker is a Christmas story. I thought that was kind of a neat little aside. Here are the hussars lined up, and the room is filled with Christmas presents. Again, Nutcracker being a Christmas story, there's going to be lots of Christmas imagery involved here. Also, walnuts. There are walnuts on the floor here. Another neat thing is that Homura is on a hospital bed because she's dead. This is a big one, the glass cabinet. Again, like I mentioned, when the clock struck midnight and the battle began, all of the toys burst out of the glass cabinet to fight. And that's what happens here. As Homura begins to fight Kyubey, all of her familiars burst out of the glass cabinet. Another shot is right here. After the witch transformation is fully complete, you see this emblem and Homu Lily on screen. The emblem is Homu Lily's body up to her neck, the spider lily crown, and then a broken tooth, just as the Nutcracker's tooth was broken. Oh, what's up? Sure.
I have researched before because I have a lot of teeth falling out things, that teeth falling out represents usually change in your life. Could that also be represented as Homura changing not as a magical girl but as a witch?
Absolutely. So the note was that teeth falling out are frequently used not only as a Nutcracker thing, but to represent change. Change in your life is a general concept. And wow, Homura's changed a lot, hasn't she? She's lost a lot of weight. Now, in this scene, okay, this isn't a video clip, but as she's walking around, there are teeth falling out of her mouth in this particular moment. And yeah, in case you want to get even more literal, there are teeth that shoot walnuts. We're going in. We're doubling down. All right, and another neat thing here is that at the very end of the Nutcracker story, the Nutcracker whisks Marie away off to the fantasy land, off to the magical kingdom that the Nutcracker controls. And there's a point at the end of the story where the Nutcracker wants to entertain Marie, so he claps his hands, and that activates the magic that gets everything going, and they all start dancing. This also happens in the ballet, too, when the Nutcracker and Marie sit at their throne and they're being entertained by all the dancers, which is the big dance in the ballet, the Nutcracker claps his hands and all the dancers start dancing. Homura also claps to activate her magic. When she's talking to Sayaka and saying, oh, well, you can't ever beat me anyway, sucks to be you, I'm going to wipe all your memories, she claps her hands and that's what activates her magic, which is another Nutcracker parallel. Also, the idea that Homura, like the Nutcracker, has whisked the object of her affection off to a fantasy land. She's so smug. What's up?
I just have a question about this scene. So when the water starts covering the ground, it's not normal water, it's purple. Is that just because purple is one of Homura's main colors?
Exactly. No, that's the color thing is exactly it. It's sort of like how I mentioned before that when Sayaka was in control of the scene, everything was blue because that was Sayaka's color. In this scene, everything is purple. The trees are purple, the water is purple because Homura is in charge. You're welcome. All right, now let's get into the cool ways that the film in the early acts foreshadows that oh, there's a question in the back.
Going back to the last slide, there was a scene where, correct me if I'm wrong, her familiars throw tomatoes at her. I'm not sure what exactly happened there.
Okay, that's a great question. So the question was, there's a scene in the movie where the Clara dolls are chucking tomatoes at Homura as she says this. Basically what Homura's saying when that happens is she's like, oh, we should pretend to at least be familiar in day-to-day life because even Madoka will hate you if you're confrontational all the time. Basically, back in the day when, theater was the main form of entertainment, the audience would chuck tomatoes and vegetables at performers that they didn't like. This is the Clara dolls' very cheeky way of screwing with their master and being like, you suck! So they're just, the Clara dolls like to mess with things. They mess with you as the viewer, they mess with Homura even though she's their master, and that is the Clara dolls being cheeky.
Would you also say that's linked to them saying
That, yes, because to them, it's a shoddy performance. The question was, is that about them being bored? Yes, they're bored with the performance. It's not good enough for them.
I mean, since they're Clara dolls and her familiars, that sort of means that they would be aspects of her psyche.
Yes, so... Exactly. That's a good point. So the note was, since the witch labyrinth is really constructed and the witch form constructed based on the magical girl's psyche itself, is the Clara doll's sort of rebelliousness a manifestation of her own psychological self-loathing and desire to be punished. And that's a very reasonable assertion. That could easily be it. Oh, I haven't read that. That's really interesting. I would definitely take a look at that again. So the note was that she had read somewhere, maybe one of the interviews on the wiki. There's a lot of material on the wiki that I haven't gotten to yet. That they were saying that the Clara dolls throw tomatoes at Homura whenever she tells a lie, and it happens earlier in the movie as well when she's on the swan boat going through the weird scenery on the way back from the Sayaka scene. I haven't looked into that myself, but that could totally be it. Yes. Yep, that is it. All right, so how does this movie foreshadow that they are all in Homura's Witch Labyrinth? So this is a quote from Jed Blue's The Very Soil, which I feel like everyone in here has probably heard of. It looks like this. If you haven't read it, go read it. It's awesome. The Kindle version is $4. The printed version is like $11. It's great. But one of the quotes from his book is, "Oddly harmless violence, food, rhythmic verse, games, arbitrary rituals. These are all common features of nonsense literature." This whole scene is nonsense. This whole witch labyrinth is nonsense. This whole nightmare fight is nonsense. And every one of those things that Jed Blue mentioned there is in this scene. Oddly harmless violence. Nobody really gets hurt. The buildings don't really get destroyed. Nothing really bad happens. The nightmare vanquish doesn't really kill anything. It just goes back to being Hitomi. They're eating food. This whole little thing is about food. Rhythmic verse, the cute little song, the game they're playing, this arbitrary ritual. Why does this thing, the thing that destroys the nightmare? It's all nonsense literature. To tell you again that this whole scene is nonsense, and it makes you think like, what is this? Why would this be a part of Madoka? Because it wouldn't be. It's nonsense. Again, we're bringing this back here. So again, this whole thing where you're seeing them through a window, which again is the barrier between the real world and the witch labyrinth. And I'll draw your attention over here to where one of the familiar things is turning the crank. There's a thing that happens a second earlier than that where you see the crank being turned from the side, and there's this cut in the screen, and you see the gears of the world itself behind all the scenery turning. And one of those gears actually breaks off and falls down, which is pretty cool. Also, one thing to note, I noticed just recently when I was reading about it. So apparently this guy turning the crank is called Drosselmeyer, which is another Nutcracker thing. So in this scene, it's hard to tell in this screen cap, but as Homura and Kyoko are talking at this lunch table, all of the scenes of the girls are like floating in the back here. There's the fork, there's the deer, there's the ribbons, there's the wind-up key down here. They're all floating back here, and they're encasing the conversation to sort of say the world is all revolving around you. This is your little cage. This is your little world. Also, in this moment, so this is after everything is kind of going to hell and the whole city is being destroyed. For a moment, you see this key in a jar on the screen, and back here, there's like a dead deer head that slides across the screen. It's conveying that Homura's attempt to keep Madoka bottled up in this little jar is going to fail. It's going to die, and it all collapses. It all comes tumbling down, if you will. And the shot is actually mirrored here, where you see the roses that represent Madoka in this jar, trapped. Now, these are the Clara dolls. Again, it's funny with the Clara dolls because there's a lot of scenes in the film where they just look at you. They're not looking at any other character. They're looking at you through the screen. And they're like playfully laughing and pointing, looking at you. She's waving at you, whispering to each other. Like as everything goes to hell, they're just like, hey, things are getting pretty bad over here. All right, so how did Homura manage to split God in half? What did she do? There's two big theories. So one, I call it the McAfee theory because it's explained at length in Brian McAfee's an in-depth look at the themes and symbols of Puella Magi, Madoka Magica, Revelations, another really good book on the subject. So his theory is that Homura Homura is exploiting the wording of her original wish to make Kyubey do her bidding. So if you go back to the TV series and you look at the scene where Homura is actually making her wish to Kyubey in episode 10, what she says isn't, I want to save Madoka. It isn't, I want Walpurgisnacht to go away. It isn't, anything like that. What she says specifically is, I want to redo my meeting with Madoka, and I want to be strong enough to protect her. For Homura, she has to protect Madoka. That's the core of her wish. What's up?
Does that go to the original Japanese? Like, is that a good translation?
Yes, that actually is a very good translation. Yeah. That's actually a really good question. Is that the original Japanese dialogue? Yeah, it matches it pretty well. And the wording of that wish is critically important, because for Homura, if Homura cannot protect Madoka, then Kyubey owes her. Kyubey owes her big time. So let's look back at this scene right here in Rebellion.
私だけが誰にも会えなくなるということに一人でいちゃうので、そんなことありっこないよ。どうして？だってそう言いたいの。だって私だよ。ホームラさんのせいにされちゃうようなそんなこと、私が我慢できるわけないじゃない。あなたにとっても。それが我慢できないほど辛いこと。そうだよ。さやかちゃん、マミさん、京子ちゃん、パパやママや達也、それにひとみちゃんやクラスのみんな。誰とだってお別れなんてしたくない。もし他にどうしようもない時だったとしても、そんな勇気私にはないよ。そうだったのね。それが本当の気持ちなら、私、なんてバカな間違い。やっぱり認めちゃいけなかったんだ。あの時、どんな手を使ってでもあなたを止めなきゃいけなかった。
I shouldn't have allowed this to happen. I should have stopped you back then. Those sentiments are Homura saying to herself, I failed to protect you. But what does that really mean? Remember, if she can't protect Madoka, then Kyubey owes her big time, because that was her wish. And Kyubey is obligated to make it happen. Kyubey doesn't have a say in the matter. He wouldn't have let Madoka become god if he did. So Homura has this ding moment where a spotlight shines down on her and she's like, I need to do something about this because I should have never let this happen in the first place. And that was the moment where she was able to exploit everything and get what she wants from Kyubey. She was able to force Kyubey to use his magic and do what she wanted to, in her opinion, protect Madoka, even if that means protecting Madoka from herself. She's exploiting a loophole in the wording of her own wish. That's a great question. So is Madoka in this scene Madoka herself, or is this just the Madoka that Homura wants to be or thinks that she should be? This is Madoka herself, but this is an uninformed Madoka. This is a Madoka who doesn't have the memories of how courageous she can really be, what sacrifice she can really perform. And Homura herself says it. Just after this bit, Homura says to Madoka, you have the courage to make decisions that you don't think you can. You don't know how strong you can be. This is the Madoka of episode 1 of the original TV series, not the Madoka of episode 12. So this scene, I love this image. This actually, I made a calendar at Vistaprint for the year, and this was my October spooky. I got to look at this every day for a whole month, and so did my coworkers. So this scene is actually really cool. So it's when Homura is being witchified, and she begins laying her trap. That's the whole point of it being spiderwebs on the screen. She has her eyes set on the moon, Madoka, and is laying her trap. And it actually happens here as she begins to activate the curse magic. A big spider web sort of comes into a line and falls down on her and begins to spread over everything. However, there's one more theory, and this one is personally mine, is that, how would Homura have had the energy to do what she did? See, Kyubey says in the original series that the amount of potential that a magical girl has is directly related to her karmic burden. And the karmic burden is the repository of potential magic that a magical girl can have. Also, the energy they're collecting when a magical girl becomes a witch is emotional energy. What Kyubey is really harvesting from these poor girls is the emotional energy generated the second that hope turns to despair. But what if there's an energy even greater than that, one that Kyubey has never actually encountered? What if Homura can harvest what she calls the pinnacle of all human emotion, love, to trump even the power of hope and despair? Well, that's exactly what happens at the end of the movie. And it's an interesting thing, too, because there's the common anime trope about the power of love and love overcoming all obstacles. And yeah, love overcame God. Wasn't a really good thing, though. So when Homura's transforming, Bebe and Sayaka, who are both the only two characters besides Madoka who really know anything about, the greater workings of the universe and the law of the cycles, note that her soul gem has changed to a color even darker than a curse. Sayaka can't even identify it. What is it? Desire, insatiability. These are two sort of emotions that might be associated with love. You desire someone insatiably. Homura herself notes that love is more passionate than hope, far deeper than despair. It is a greater emotional energy. It is the greatest emotional energy. It is the source of power that allows Homura to overcome even Madoka, who is still relying on hope for her powers. Now, an interesting thing is when Kyubey was talking about the whole karmic burdens thing, he has this scene where he has Madoka propped up and he's talking about how all the woven threads of karma in the universe are making her so powerful, but also how they're binding her. But check this out. There's a shot that comes very soon after that with Homura in the same exact position. So as we know, Kyubey is a bit of a treacherous liar. Kyubey doesn't tell you everything. Kyubey may not have told Homura that really she too carries a lot of karmic burden. But the issue with them is that Homura is already transformed. So any karmic burden that Homura puts on herself after she's become a magical girl is irrelevant because she's already transformed. But what if Homura was going to transform again? What if Homura, now bearing the ridiculous karmic burden of setting Madoka up as a god over the course of jumping through hundreds, if not thousands, of timelines, is going to harvest that karmic burden in another way? This is the part where Kyubey is talking about how he's converting the sentient, life form, emotion, energy thing. At the moment when your soul gems flare out and turn into grief seeds... Wait, do I have this written? No, sorry. So at the moment when your soul gems flare out and become a grief seed, that emotional energy is what Kyubey collects. Well, Kyubey, at the moment where Homura's soul gem flared out and turned into whatever it turned into, that's the moment where all the power came out. All of the latent Homura energy came out, and that's what Kyubey used as the fuel to rip God in half and rewrite the universe in Homura's image. Does everyone get this point? Yep. Cool. All right, well, moving on from there, I think there's a lot of really cool other images we should discuss. We only have a few minutes left, so I'll try to breeze through this really quickly. These aren't necessarily tied to any really overarching humongous themes, but they're really cool shots in the movie that are telling. Like, for example, in this scene, Kyoko and Sayaka are teasing each other and having a friendly little chat, and in the middle of them, you have all these ballerinas doing their dance with each other back and forth, kind of mimicking the song and dance that Kyoko and Sayaka are always doing with each other. In the Nightmare fight, whenever a character attacks, their colors dominate the screen. So when Mami and Homura are attacking together, the screen is full of pinks and yellows. But then as soon as the attack travels through the air and Homura uses her ability to make it move, the screen turns very purple. This is another foreshadowing shot as Homura starts to begin to question her surroundings. Her expression softens and clouds roll in. This is a really cool one. So this is the scene before they go to Mami's apartment, when Homura, Mami, and Madoka all have tea and talk about whatever. This little shot, that's like a transition shot that's on frame for 2 seconds, actually mirrors the entire apartment scene. So you've got this phonograph, which is a Homura symbol. You've got the wind-up clock key here, which is a Madoka symbol. You've got the couch they're sitting on. You've got this golden light. You could. It's a little stretchy, but the gold color of Mami, you could think of it that way. And it just looks kind of homey. Not a big deal, but I thought it was kind of a neat little transition shot into this scene. In this scene, Homura is asking prying questions. She's beginning to understand that things are not what they appear to be, and she's asking mommy, oh, when did you meet baby? Like, asking about the past. The whole time, there are multiple angles where the table is pointing at Kyubey. The whole time, it's like a big arrow saying, hey, he's right there! He's right there! So that's a cool little thing. And like the camera pans around the room several times and you still see that point, like pointing at Kyubey. And this is one of those things that like has to be deliberate because Kyubey could have sat anywhere in the room, but no, he sat right where the table is pointing at. So this scene, check this out.
でもそうね。今にして思えば、これって昔の私が夢に見ていた毎日なのだよね。魔法少女としての運命を受け入れた生き方が、こんなに幸せで充実したものになるなんて、あの頃思ってもみなかった。
So as the camera pans around and mommy is talking about how things were used to be harder, the shots get increasingly more predatory. First you see her just laying there, then it's a shot where you're looking kind of through the stairs, then you're like looking really closely through the stairs, and then you're looking at her through bars. It's super predatory, and it kind of sets up the idea that, first of all, they're trapped. They're all trapped in this world, in this little Homura prison here, and that Kyubey is always watching. That's something that is hammered into you in a lot of images in the original series. Oh yeah, this is that moment where as she's walking by, there's one frame or like two frames of the ribbon coming out of mommy's feet as she goes. We'll never see this smile again. Look at it, it's so pure. Maybe. All right, so this is the part where Homura is sort of riding this big swan thing, and she's going through all this stuff. And you see a lot of symbology on the screen. You see the windows again, which is the labyrinth symbol. You see a cut-up mermaid. Sayaka's dead on the table. In the back, you see those rabbits. Actually, it's not moving. Is this moving? No, it's not moving. Where the rabbits getting their heads cut off. That's mommy. Again, mommy is a four-legged animal in a lot of instances in this film. And this four-legged animal is having its head chopped off. It's also happening in the bottom right here. You see this right here again, where you have this key in the jar, and you also have a merwoman in a jar. Again, everyone's trapped. It's sort of this idea of like everyone's trapped, and also these horrible things. This is what happened to everyone. They're all gone. Now this is a really cool one. So in the scene where Homura is running through flowers and is saying, "Oh well, I had this terrible dream," she's running through a field of plumeria flowers. Plumeria flowers are a very specific symbol in the Victorian language of flowers. Let me see exactly what I've written down here. So one thing is that in some local folk beliefs, the plumeria flower is a flower that provides shelter to ghosts and demons. Shelter, ghost, demon. Also, these flowers are kind of dicks, because here's the thing with them. They are very pungent, and they smell like nectar, but they don't actually produce any nectar. They trick moths into flying to them to pollinate them by accident, but don't actually give the moths any nectar. It's just useless. So they're tricking other things into coming into them for nothing. Just as Homura sucked all of the girls into her little labyrinth for no good. Now, this one, I wasn't really sure because I found very inconsistent information on it, but I read somewhere that dandelions may be seen as a gift of faithfulness and devotion, but that's not from the Victorian language of flowers because the Victorians considered dandelions nothing more than an annoying weed and didn't give it any meaning. But I thought it was an interesting thing to think about. Now, in this scene, Homura is standing there and Madoka begins trying to rebraid her hair. Now, braids are frequently used all over the place as a symbol of childishness and innocence. And Madoka is trying to restore Homura's childishness and innocence. But we know that's not going to work, and it all falls apart.
I always view the dandelion plump as more of an innocence because whenever you see dandelion plump, you're being a child blowing the fluff away. So that reverts to this scene as well. The fluff is going into the air, the innocence is leaving.
That's a good point. So the note was that with dandelions, especially when you're a kid, you blow them a lot. You pick them out of the grass and you blow them away, and that's sort of an idea of innocence leaving. Oh, right. Yeah, the idea that when you blow on a dandelion, you make a wish. You could also think of that as Homura's wish. Let me blast through the end here because we should probably get moving pretty soon, and I'll take some questions at the end. Oh my God, why this isn't quick? This is a nightmare. So this okay. Let me just play this. Stay in school, don't do drugs.
Notice that Homura breaking through herself is similar to what she broke through herself in the transformation.
Yes, and I'll get to that. I'm going to go through this like frame by frame. Hang on a minute. Strap in. All right, so there's a lot going on in this. So look at this scene here. Madoka is in a Christ pose. She's on this chair, and she's about to sacrifice herself. She's about to fall off and die. So that's frame number one, is Homura. Homura views Madoka as self-sacrificial, even again, if Madoka doesn't. The next bit, Homura attempts to stop it. In this attempt, her innocence dies. Moemura crumbles away, and we get this sad, broken Homura that we know. She metamorphosizes out of her innocence, which again mirrors the shot from the beginning in the transformation sequence where she becomes this cute girl. Now she's not the cute girl anymore. She's changed into something else. But she fails. She fails, and the cute version of herself, the past version of herself, is looking down on her in judgment. What the heck? Anyway. There's no fire, right? Anyway, the past version of herself is looking down on her, casting judgment on herself. She's failed. She wants to punish herself. Homura wants punishment. That's the thing she craves. And so she smashes herself. And note that she's only smashing herself and not the other Homuras. She's punishing, or wants to punish, the version of herself that she believes failed. But she's still small. She still feels useless. This is, again, the idea that Homura is useless. She's small. She's smaller than these chairs. She doesn't feel like she can do anything. And finally, her witch form grasps that memory in its arms, remembering how we got here. That's what led to this. A few other really quick things, because I know we got to get moving soon. I don't know what the deal is with Sayaka stabbing her own heart out to summon her witch. I just thought it was really cool. Now this part, so at the very, very end of the film, right before the stinger, you see this phonograph, which is again Homura's symbol, and it flickers for a moment and it bursts. This is to show us that Homura has finally broken free of her cycle. The cyclical nature of her quest is over. There is resolution now. Homura has done it, and she's free from the cycle. Another fun bit here is real fun. So shoes left on a roof this is a common symbol of suicide in Japan. But a lot of people, when people jump off a roof, for some reason, I'm actually not sure why, it's custom to leave your shoes on the roof before you jump. And this scene is referencing that to Homura, this is a suicidal act. Homura wants to be punished. She's suffering, and she's bringing this on herself, and she knows it. But this is a really neat moment. So this is after being told that she'll never win and Homura will always have the upper hand and blah, blah, blah. Sayaka says, oh yeah, I'm a mysterious girl, when she's talking to Hitomi and Kyosuke being an absolute ponce. And we get this shot from behind Sayaka's head where she still has her ring and she still has her moon fingernail painting. So does Sayaka have more power than she's letting on? Is Sayaka more in control than she's letting on? We don't know, but it's really interesting to think about. Maybe Sayaka has more of a chance against Homura than Homura thinks she does. Now, this is a really, really awesome shot. So there's this whole sequence that very much mirrors the first episode of the TV show, where Madoka transfers in instead of Homura, and Homura sees her and leads her around the school and yada yada. There's a shot when that happens in the first episode where Madoka turns to the camera very quickly, and it pans into another scene. This is a transition shot that's used a few times in the first 3 episodes. This shot is directly mirroring that shot. Homura is looking back in the same direction, indicating that Homura is the protagonist now. This is Homura's world. And they're putting her in the same cinematography position as Madoka to indicate that. Now, I really wanted to go through the stinger, but the stinger is so dense with imagery that I honestly we don't have time. We don't have time to go through all I know. But do we have like 5 minutes? The next panel is at 9:30. Okay, so let's go through this quick. This is literally the last slide. So this is the stinger. This is the final thing of the movie. Can't say really feel too bad for you there, buddy. All right, let me just... The barrier between Homura's garden and the rest of the universe is tied shut. Madoka cannot escape. She's locked in. Homura has... Let me get to the proper moment. Oh, come on. Anyway, so the scene where she's sitting in her chair and it's split in half and the moon is cut in half and the cliff is cut in half, it's a direct mirror of that chair scene, but now Madoka is entirely absent. Homura knows deep down that this version of Madoka that she's with is an empty shell. But for her, it's good enough. It's something. It's Madoka not suffering in this little bubble she's created. But she's not really with her true other half. She's not with the object of her infection. Homura can only be alone, but she's willing to accept that sacrifice if it means that some version of Madoka can be happy. That's why the moon is cut in half, because again, Homura and Madoka's two halves of the moon, it's been severed. Now, there's a lot you can talk about with the dance. I'm not really too familiar with it. I think that Jed Blue does a bit of coverage on that in his Rebellion chapter, or chapters. I'm not that familiar with it, so I can't comment too much on it. Cube got exactly what he deserved. And that is it. So I hope you all enjoyed the panel. Here are some really good things to read. Madoka's great. There's so many things that I didn't even get to touch on in this movie. It's super dense, but I hope you all have a better idea now of why Rebellion is totally cool. Thanks for coming out, folks. Enjoy your con.